Hello and welcome to another episode of PsycKicks. My name is Liv, and this is a podcast where we talk about all things metaphysical, spiritual, paranormal, and in between. Today, we're going to be talking about the theme, the underlying current that you could conceptualize as love and light. And this is my second time recording this. I got like a half an hour through just a minute ago, and all of a sudden, everything just on my computer stopped. I have a charge of 100%, and everything that I would just recorded was lost. So I'm trying to bring forth the will to live. Because I don't know why I'm so nervous about recording this podcast today. I don't know if it's the executive dysfunction coming through or just the fact that I am nervous to talk about something that I've just been mulling over in my mind periodically for the better part of, June, July, August, September, October, 4 months. And I don't know. We're going to take two. So if you're new to the podcast, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you enjoy what we're about to talk about. Last week, we talked about crossing over souls and why or reasons why a soul might stay earthbound instead of crossing over into heaven, spirit, source, the light, whatever you want to call it, the space in which souls reside. And I talked about and mentioned briefly at the beginning of last week's podcast, I asked the question, does the soul live in the body or does the body live in the soul? And I just that whole thing, I told myself in that podcast, I was like, at the end of it, we'll talk about it. And hopefully I don't forget. And I did. So that is what we're going to start out with today before we get into concepts or ideas that could fall under, the terminology or the phrase love and light. Because I don't know. I'm excited to talk about it today. I'm also very nervous. Hopefully my recording program doesn't just turn off magically all of a sudden like it did 5 seconds ago. So let's see how it goes. So when I ask you, do you think the soul lives in the body or the body lives in the soul? What would your answer be? If you need to, take a second, pause this recording, write it down, shout it out into the ether, get your 5-step bazillion PowerPoint page presentation that you would give to me if I were sitting across from you ready to give me your dissertation on what you think is or isn't the idea of it or what is or isn't wrong. And we'll come back. Mind you, with the answer I'm about to give you or my idea of it, it is not an answer because this podcast isn't here to give you. I'm not here to tell you how to think. I'm here to give you cool ideas and perceptions, or hopefully cool ideas and perceptions and facts about spiritual things or things that can help shape your perception and your journey on spirituality, because it's all about what you think and feel attuned to and what jives with you. So I'm going to tell you, I used to think that the soul lives in the body because as a medium, right? Someone who talks to dead people, I give thinking that the soul lives in the body has helped me to conceptualize how mediumship is plausible. I would always say that I believe that there is a separation between the energy of the body and the energy of the soul because our bodies and our souls follow the third law of thermodynamics, which states that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just is. It's neither increasing nor decreasing, and therefore it has to be transferred from one state to the next or from one source to another. So our physical bodies follow the law of thermodynamics. All of the energy of our physical body eventually decays into the soil, but it's not lost. That energy of us when we die and decay into the soil goes back into the soil, and then the trees and the animals and the plants and everything reuse that energy of our physical body, right? But what happens to our soul? That would give rise to the plausibility of our energy of our soul, which exists at a different frequency that scientists aren't able to quantify yet. It's not that we can't conceptualize it, but we can't quantify how a soul or the energy of a soul exists. But for me, I can say, well, I think that energy of a soul exists at a different frequency, a frequency that science has not been able to quantify yet. So it exists in spirit, heaven, source, whatever you want to call it. When people say, I'm trying to raise my vibration to become more spiritual, it's because souls exist on that higher vibration in heaven or spirit. So like when people also say, oh, well, heaven is above, right? I think that's also a gesture to the fact that souls exist, their energy, their particles at a higher frequency that we aren't as humans able to understand yet. So anyways, that is how I've been able to understand or conceptualize how mediumship is plausible, right? Or at least one of the ways that leads into my dissertation on it. So I've always thought, okay, so the soul lives in the body. But I've been reading this book by John O'Donohue, and I'm excited to hopefully read some of his other books too. But one of the things that he says is that the body lives in the soul. And it took me, I'm not going to lie, a few pages to actually be on board with what he was saying. Because I was in the corner like, nope, 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 nope. That is not true. The soul lives in the body. You can't tell me anything else. I had like my lab coat on and there was a beaker boiling next to me. My little scientific self was like, you can't tell me anything different. That's not how it works, sir. And now I don't think either is wrong or either is right. I just think that the way that you rearrange those words, right? The soul lives in the body or the body lives in the soul will help you on your own spiritual journey as it has helped me in perceiving spiritual ideas and how we can understand the transfer of energy or the essence of divinity. So, okay, I'm sorry I'm using weird words. It kind of makes me feel freaked out, because of like adding I'm going out of my comfort zone with reading these books too. And like the lingo that some of these books use as well. I feel like some of them are very like clickbaity words or buzzwords. Or words that might be like religiously triggering or something. Because for me, I've always had a sort of aversion to organized religion just from how I was raised and the society and culture in which I was raised into. It's just sort of been like painted on me in a sort of haphazard way without me really being an active participant in it. So to use the word divinity makes me feel like I'm like a little preachy and I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm going to use it anyway. So when I use this word in the podcast, please understand that I'm saying your soul, your essence of divine energy that is within you, because that for me is what a soul is. It is the divinity within you. It is your soul. So I think that when you rearrange those words and you start to believe that the body is in the soul, it's really freaking cool. What John O'Donohue got me with was saying that the soul suffuses the body, which means it ingrains, it flows through, it's effervescent almost around your body, and that your body exists within the energy of your soul, almost like a cloud. And I was able to think about the idea of an aura. People give aura readings, right? They're like, oh, it's the energy around you. Think about that. Think about your soul being kind of like your aura or an extension of your essence, of your divinity that is you. So if you think about it in that way, and I'm just talking purely visually, I'm not saying that an aura is the same thing as a soul. I'm just saying that I think to understand or conceptualize that your body lives within the energy of your soul is very beautiful, and it can change the way that you perceive spiritual ideas, such as how you would channel energy as a medium, or just, everyone has psychic abilities, right? If you're new to the podcast, go search through the podcast titles. You'll find stuff to figure it out. I don't want to keep like repeating it. If you need questions, maybe you'll put a question in the comments below if you're listening on the PsycKicks Extras YouTube channel. But if, for example, if you like, everything has a soul. We talked about that in last week's podcast when I talked about or mentioned briefly Aristotle's analysis of souls. So he says plants have souls, animals have souls, people have souls, and there was a building block or Pythagorean trinity, 3, if you will, of the depth of what a soul can be in or within an object such as a plant, animal, person. But for example, you're a person, right? If we're going with the idea that your body lives within your soul sort of just permeates through your body, this divine essence around you and through you. If you go outside and you want to walk around barefoot to ground yourself, technically, in the spiritual sense, the ground around you also has this divine suffusion of energy permeating through it as well. So when you're walking or choosing to ground yourself barefoot outside, your soul, your essence is mingling, muddling with that of the ground below you, which may be like the transfer of spiritual energy that leads to people feeling grounded, Like there is also, if you want to think about it in a scientific sense too, I was reading something that the microbes within the soil, when you actually have your feet get dirty, or your hands, if you're planting things or making a garden, whatever, when your hands touch the soil, the microbiome of the soil interacts with the microbiome of your hands and your body, and actually will release signals of happiness, like chemical signals in your brain of happiness and endorphins, which help you to actually feel better. So if you want to look at it from a spiritual sense or biological/physiological sense, it's just really freaking cool. And it's absolutely changing my perception on a lot of spiritual concepts, of thinking that there is this difference between ourselves and the world around us, that we have to separate our identity of who we are as an individual, both spiritually and physically, from everything else around us. But I don't think that's the case. I've had people ask me in readings, they'll ask me about their spirit guides, right? They make a psychic medium reading with me, and one of the questions is, can you tell me something about my spirit guides? Sure, I would love to. And I give them the disclaimer is what I call it, my spirit guide disclaimer. Because there's a podcast very far back when we first started PsycKicks that says I don't do spirit guide readings because I think it's rude, which I still kind of think it is. But I mean, if someone wants to ask about their spirit guides, and I'm able to give them that information, my disclaimer is the way in which I perceive your spirit guides is not necessarily what they look like. It will be indicative to who they are and how they help you. But unlike the physical souls that we've lost, people that we love or pets, we don't know what your spirit guides, quote unquote, look like. So therefore, what they show me is going to be symbolic of giving me information to tell you about them. So one of the things that spirit guides will show me is that they're green or blue. And it's interesting because usually when a spirit guide shows me that they're green, that is not necessarily what they look like. It tells me something about them and how they help or are here to guide you in this life. And green for me symbolizes that they're here to help you understand the physical world around you, in addition to the fact that the physical and the spiritual are not that far apart. They're intertwined. They're melded into one another. And it seems that so many people want to be spiritual and define what spirituality means to them and go on their own spiritual journey and embrace this lifestyle. I feel like is more what people have started to think that it is, but I don't necessarily think it's a lifestyle. But that's not what we're talking about today. It's that they almost have to disconnect themselves from the world around them and certain concepts in order to reach this quote unquote high spirituality or enlightenment. But that's what these spirit guides are here for. They're here to teach you that spirituality and physicality, and that the energy of both live within one another. The soul does not live in the body lives in the soul. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. It changes my perspective on a lot of things. It's almost like it doesn't change how I think about things. It more so it's like I've been looking at certain spiritual concepts under one lens, the lens of that the body, the soul lives in the body. But now I have the lens or the perception of that the body lives in the soul with a lot of the spiritual things and concepts that I've been thinking about. And it's just like blowing my mind up. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. Like when I channel energy, like, for example, if you're empathetic, if you are an empath, not empathetic, empathic, if you are empathic or you believe that you feel other people's emotions. It's very common. A lot of people tell me that they're an empath, and that just tells me that you have clairsentient capabilities, which means that you have psychic capabilities in order to feel other people's emotions, but not just their emotions, also physical feelings. And it's been making me this idea that the body lives in the soul, that the way people can channel energy is that of your essence, your divinity sort of intertwines with someone else's in order to receive that information. And that just I don't know, that's a very intimate sort of idea of channeling energy. And it's very, very thought-provoking to me. So I wanted to talk to you guys about that, how my idea not necessarily has changed, but how I've adopted and integrated a new perception in the lens in which I use to view spirituality. And it's really freaking cool. I really like it. So now that we're talking about looking at something in a new light or under a new lens, that's probably the good enough segue that I need in order to move into the actual topic of today's podcast, which is ideas under love and light. So I've been mentioning how 22-year-old Olivia, which is how old I was, I might have even been 21, not yet 22. I'm not sure. When we started PsycKicks, and now I'm 27, and thinking about 22-year-old Olivia versus 27-year-old Olivia is just very different. Very, I don't know if it's eye-opening. I think it's more like squinty, like what was 22-year-old Olivia thinking? Like what was she going through? I don't understand this like absolute malarkey of her existence. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, given that I was 22 at one point, was 12 and 13-year-old Olivia. So when I was little, my mother is a medium. If you're new to the podcast and you don't know, she has been a medium her whole life, but she chose to not necessarily ignore it, but just like do nothing, be Switzerland on it, you know? And it wasn't until I was 8 or 9 that I started experiencing paranormal things too. And she was like, "Ah, shiz, I actually have to do something about this now because my child is experiencing things that I experienced when I was little. And I've never actually tried to understand it because I didn't want to, nor did I need to. And no one else could have helped me. But now in this day and age, it's the idea of, is she crazy or is she a medium like me?" So in my mom's late 30s, early 40s, she started to try to understand and embrace her mediumship in order to help me. And because of that, I went a lot of places with her. I was 12 or 13, I think, when she started doing this, going to metaphysical shops and psychic fairs and things like that to learn more about spirituality and how she could understand her gifts and things like that. And my mom and I were really close when I was younger. So people might be listening like, "Oh, why are you with your mom all the time when you were that old? Like, aren't you old enough to stay home?" But we were close. So I would just go everywhere with her. So one of the things that I would learn, or I heard a lot when we went to metaphysical shops and psychic fairs, because her one spiritual mentor told her, like, go to psychic, like, do readings for people, because your spirit guides will help you to understand your gifts and how they work and in what ways you can understand them. So you need to give readings to people in order to understand how you work as a medium, etc. So my mom did that, and she took me with her. And through those experiences, a lot of the things that I heard from other spiritual quote unquote adults at that time, because remember, I was like 12, 13, was love and light, in love and light. And I just remember thinking as a child, like, this is the most hokey, funny BS I've ever heard. Like, what do you mean in love and light? And mind you, at this point in time too, I'd never really gone to church. The only church I'd ever gone to was with my friend Abby, and it was a Lutheran church. Every so often on a Sunday when I would sleep over, I'd go with her family. And I mean, this was 12, 13-year-old Olivia. And when it came to church time, when everyone would look at each other at the end of service and be like, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." Abby and I would look at each other and be like, "Peace be with you." So, that was 12 or 13-year-old Olivia. I thought love and light was goofy and kind of hokey. And just the people in the spiritual community too that I was seeing and that I was around, I also thought were hokey. Because I don't know, I was 12 or 13. I wanted to share that with you. So now, even when we first started PsycKicks, I felt like I had to talk about things that are like sign emails, like in love and light, because so many other people in the metaphysical community do that. And I was like, ooh, that like reminds me of 12, 13-year-old Olivia when I would go to psychic fairs and people would like give you business cards and it said like love and light, Sherry, or something like that. And I just thought it was silly. But I have always ended my emails or like any sort of letter I've written to people with sincerely, which I believe in Latin means with love or with some sincerity or something like that. And I just always thought that was cool. So I just always use sincerely. But now on my Patreon life updates, when I post them, I've been writing love and light because 27-year-old Olivia kind of wants to go back to 12 or 13-year-old Olivia and sit her down and be like, listen, you just don't understand yet how important it is to try and share or extend the gift of love and light to others, because it's important. It's not hokey. And if it's coming from the person with the right intentions, it has a lot of like groundingness and sincerity in it, in and of itself. So it's just an idea that I've been trying to embody in my own way now that I am a little more grown. I'm sure there's people out there that are like, you're 27. I'm older than you. You're silly, which I get. I respect that. I'm sure in however many years from now, older Olivia will look back on this podcast and be like, 27-year-old Olivia was silly. Or maybe not. Maybe if I'm going in the right direction, maybe she won't think that me right now is silly. But anyways, I wanted to talk about that before we get into the topic or the quote that I want to talk about today, because it talks about light, and that is what I wanted to talk about. All right. So I have been reading this book called Living in the Light by Shakti Gawain. I'm going to say Gawain. I don't think it's Gawain. I think it's Gawain, Shakti Gawain, Living in the Light. And I'm going to tell you, I have not finished it. But I wrote something down, like, I think it was in June, because I was in Chicago with my husband for his work training. And I picked this book up at Half Price Books. And I was excited to read it because I've been trying to read more books lately. And it's been nerve-wracking. I think that's why I'm nervous to record this podcast today too, because I feel like I need to know everything that I'm talking about, or know or be well-versed in whatever it is that I'm talking about, but that is not always the basis for this podcast. It's to share perspectives and learn and grow together and not always be right, because in spirituality, I don't think there is a right and wrong. It's just about perspectives. But I'm nervous to share this because I've been mulling over this idea in my head for a while, and I'm going to share it with you today. But this book, I think, has a lot of like buzzwords, and I think there's a lot of buzzwords in spirituality in and of itself, a lot of like clickbaity sort of things, if you will, if you want to put it in like a new age or newer lingo. And it can be overwhelming. And I think sometimes buzzwords and things that are clickbaity, maybe not sometimes, things of this nature should not be taken literally, but they are taken literally by people. And I think sometimes that can be detrimental to others. So I was reading this book and I actually had to stop reading it just a little bit, because the ideas and the ways that they word the things that they talk about, Shakti does, is something it was a little overwhelming for me. It was a little ungrounded, I would say. And that is one of the reasons I stopped reading it. I was like, okay, well, I resonate with a lot of these ideas and concepts so far. Like I kind of know them, but I didn't necessarily like how they were worded. And I'm still going to finish the book, but I've just taken a break from it. And I wanted to talk about one of the excerpts that I took from the book and give you my perception of what it has taught me, and then go from there. So let's break it. I'm going to give you the whole quote first, and then I'm going to break it down into the two parts that helped me to understand it a little bit and draw a conclusion or a perspective from it based on, I had to really think about what I read and then think about how it made me feel. So this is what I read. This is the quote from Shakti. The piercing of the veil of illusion, the point where we truly recognize that our physical world is not the ultimate reality, and we begin to turn inward to discover the true nature of existence. At these times, we feel we are hitting a bottom, but as we actually hit the bottom, we fall through a trapdoor into a bright new world, the realm of spiritual truth. Only by moving fully into the darkness can we move through into the light. So there's our term of light that we're using for the theme of love and light today. But let's break down part 1 first. And part 1 of this statement is going to be the piercing of the veil of illusion, that our physical world, when we truly recognize that our physical world is not the ultimate reality, and we begin to turn inward to discover the true nature of existence. I feel like that part just right there, especially when they say the veil of illusion, something in the spiritual community that people talk about a lot is the thinning of the veil, right? Like around Halloween time or certain equinoxes or whatever. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about this quote, thinning of the veil, but it's more so, I don't know. I mean, talking about with the idea of that the soul, the body lives in the soul, right? So that energy, we exist within the energy of our soul. And so does everything else around us. It exists within the energy. The physical exists within the spiritual. I feel like having this veil, this illusion of the veil, makes it feel like it would be the opposite, that we are separate from this energy that intrinsically is a part of us. So I think when it comes to this first part, it's very open to interpretation. And it was hard for me to personally keep myself grounded when I read this section of the book. Because I'm like, the veil of illusion, that our physical world isn't our actual reality. Then I'm like, what is reality? And I started thinking, I'm like, some people might interpret this, because I started to, as like ghosts, aliens, starseeds, alternate realities, fairies, cryptids, etc. All of that sort of like spiritual stuff, yet wonky spiritual stuff, might be how people interpret this section or this quote of the book. And there's a lot of other parts of this book where like Shakti mentions the coming of, quote, the new age or the new age order. And that is something that I've been hearing a lot on the internet and in people that leave comments on YouTube videos and other stuff. They're like, you want to talk about the new age order and this new world order? And I'm just like, that sounds like apocalyptic. And it honestly freaks me out and makes me like very anxious and like nervous and sad, maybe. Just trying to tell you emotions that phrase evokes within me. And I was actually talking to my husband about that too. I was like, what do you think about like this new world order that everyone's talking about? And like this stuff that everything isn't what it seems, and that we're living in this illusion, this veil of illusion. And he just told me, he was like, remember when the world was supposed to end in like 2012? And I was like, yeah. He was like, people have been talking about a new world order for millennium. It's just different every century or couple centuries. And I was like, okay, that makes me feel better. But it still nonetheless freaks me out a little bit with the type of buzzwords or just like big sort of words that people use to give these big or evoke these big feelings from people. But when I read these things, I was thinking, okay, they might be talking about, alternate realities, like the spiritual world. And like, this isn't our physical reality, is just the illusion of the metaphysical that exists everywhere that we're trying to look for, and like different planets and different realities and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, well, those things do exist. I'm a medium, right? I talk to souls. Those are what people would call ghosts, but ghosts just makes it seem so much scarier. And yes, alternate alternate timelines exist, or like alternate dimensions exist. And there are certain timelines that are given to you as options in order to go around a certain path to get to the future. And Fae exist in my mind as energetic beings, but maybe that's a little bit different for how you might conceptualize fairies. But yes, those things exist. But I think literal interpretations of these ideas can cause people to dissociate from reality and thus spirituality. Because I don't think that spirituality is found within dissociating from yourself and the world around you. It's from realizing, like these green spirit guides have been trying to tell me, I think when I do readings, or at least teach me, not tell me, but teach me through my readings of others, that the spiritual and the physical exist within one another. Our body exists within our soul. Trees, plants, animals, the world around us has a soul, and we are part of it. We live there. So if we want to find the spiritual nature of the world around us, shouldn't we sort of connect to the nature around us, to the world around us that suffuses and emanates this divinity intrinsically? I don't know. It's what I've been thinking about, guys. It's been bothering me. And I'm really nervous to tell you all about it. And the fact that this podcast already stopped once and now I have to redo it is just even making me more nervous. And I'm like past the point, this like 30-minute mark that it stopped at last time. I'm like, is it going to stop again? Am I supposed to be talking about this? Like, what's happening? So anyways, something this book mentions is the New World Order. Again, I said that was like a frightening terminology for me. And I think our physical world is not our ultimate reality. Or when this book, this quote talks about how, quote, our physical world is not our ultimate reality, I think this leads people to literally interpret these words. But my interpretation of this quote is a little bit different. So I know, I talked about ghost aliens, alternate dimensions, things like that. I had to stop myself too and reevaluate my thinking. So I'm going to read the quote one more time, and then I'm going to tell you what I think I can gain from it instead of a literal interpretation that sort of leads you down this rabbit hole of feeling like you have to dissociate yourself from the world around you, which I think is not intrinsically spiritual. I think that might be detrimental. The first part of the quote is the piercing of the veil of illusion, the point where we truly recognize that our physical world is not the ultimate reality, and we begin to turn inward to discover the true nature of existence. I think what they're talking about here, Shakti, or one of the ways that you can interpret this in a different perspective, is that you realize that you don't have to live your life in the normal way that we do today, i.e. the 9 to 5, this consumer sort of lifestyle that I think a lot of us in the West are living, of like, I have to do this, I have to attain that, I have to have a car, and I have to have a house, and I have to have a dog, and I have to have this, and I have to go on this vacation, I have to visit that place, and I have this. It's this consumption of things around us, not being grateful or finding gratitude in the life that we live, and always trying to find the next new thing that gives us a sense of happiness, where I think maybe perhaps we're looking for this next new emotion when we could just be finding peace within contentment. Because contentment isn't necessarily being happy. It's not being joyful. It's not being sad. It's not being angry. It's not a lot of things. It is just, I think, peace and contentment maybe go hand in hand, but there is always the ebb and flow of the world around you, of realizing that happiness is not constant, love is not constant, joy is not constant, but neither is despair and depression and sorrow and sadness. None of those things are constant. It's an ebb and a flow, a give and a take. That is what balance is, and that is what leads to contentment, perhaps. And I think that when you think about piercing the veil of illusion, it's this illusion of how society has portrayed us to live as individuals. You can still be a part of society, but you don't have to live by the same standards or values that they do. And this is not to say that you just throw caution to the wind and you're like, oh, I've realized that I can live my life however I want. I don't have to do a 9 to 5. I'm not telling you to make an entire jump from one extra to another extra. We're not talking about that. I'm just talking about the fact of don't throw morals to the wind. Don't start cheating and lying and stealing and being a bad person. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying like the societal way that we live our lives means that we throw caution to the wind and just dive headlong into living life however we see fit in lieu of losing our sense of morals and humanity. No. I'm just saying that we can pierce the veil of illusion, as they say, and understand that the physical world is not our ultimate reality. The physical world being physical things. We don't always need the newest, nicest thing. We don't always need this and that and chasing these highs, if you will. That is sort of how I interpret this idea or this part of the quote. I don't know. What do you guys think? If you're still listening, let me know in the comments below. But let's move on to the next part of this quote that I want to break down. So the first part is just realizing that you don't have to be a part or a cog within the machine of this culture we've cultivated of quote unquote keeping up with the Joneses, and realizing that the entire world is innately magical and a reflection of the divine energy anyways. Spirituality and peace can be channeled anywhere. There are no rules to it. That is what I think the first part is. So anyways, the second part, the second part of this quote is, at these times, we feel we are hitting a bottom, but as we actually hit the bottom, we fall through a trapdoor into a bright new world, the realm of a spiritual truth. Only by moving fully into the darkness can we move through into the light. So this, I also think, can be misconstrued possibly in a more literal way of interpreting these words, where people might think, oh, I have to go into this darkness of myself in order to attain this spiritual truth, and then I'll move into the light. And it gives this sort of like self-deprecation sort of literal interpretation, I feel like, in my opinion. But honestly, when I read this, again, I had to step back, not perceive it or interpret its words literally by seeing like, oh, we actually like fall through a spiritual door into the realm of spiritual truth, and that it's completely dark, but if we can push through feeling in this terrible conceptualization of darkness, this self-deprecation, that we can move into the light of quote unquote spiritual truth. And I don't like spiritual truth. I feel like when you say it that way, it makes people feel like it is the one and only truth. Like it has to be this way. And I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think I agree with it. It makes me a little on edge, as you can tell. But after trying to step back and not like down the rabbit hole of whatever, reading this, I figured that the second part really means that the light of the world in which you view it is what they're talking about. You don't sort of like, when you realize that you don't have to quote unquote keep up with the Joneses, you realize that you can start to slow down. You can live your life in more meaningful and mindful and purposeful ways. And you can find happiness and joy and content in more simple things, not always trying to reach for the next thing. Again, keeping up with the Joneses. Once you release that illusion of having to keep up with the Joneses, you can step into this light. But when you do, when you realize that you don't have to keep up with the Joneses, that you can just live your life in a way that makes you happy and not have to push yourself and grind so hard every single day, if you're okay with living your life in a more simple way, then it might feel like you're falling through a trapdoor. You're like, shit, I have worked so hard and I've done all of these things for so long that I feel lost. That's that darkness, you know? That's that, why did I work 60 hours in 1 week just to pay my car bill when I could try and just get a car that's a little less expensive? Or why did I work a 60-hour work week when I could have just taken vacation, but now I have this money in the bank, but I don't feel any happier, type of thing. That's what I think Shakti, or one of the ways you could interpret what Shakti is talking about when it comes to going through that trapdoor and pushing through this darkness. Because I am not someone that you can, just because I'm saying these things doesn't mean that I'm not struggling with it too. That's what I want to say. Sometimes when I do readings for people, souls and spirits come through and say things in a way that answer questions to the person I'm talking to, their loved one. And this person's like, oh, you're so wise. You're so this. Listen to me. I'm not wise. I'm not this. I struggle with this idea still too. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, I've found joy and peace and contentment. I'm not trying to keep up with Joneses. I'm not trying to grind. I'm not trying to get a paycheck. I'm not trying to aspire to have these certain things in this consumer world that we live in. No, I am just telling you that these are realizations I've had, but I am not this enlightened, spiritual, peaceful being that lives by these rules that I'm talking about, or these concepts or theories I'm talking about. I still struggle with these things too. So I think when they say you go through that trapdoor and into this darkness, you have to push your way through until you find the light. That, I think, is what they're talking about. You realize, I've given so much of my time to trying to maintain a certain lifestyle and a certain image of myself to the world. But what does your image mean if you can't even look at yourself in the mirror, or don't even have time to reflect upon who you are and what you want to be, not only to yourself, but to others? That can be really hard. And I think that is that darkness. Let's go back to her quote. So Shakti says, at these times, we feel we are hitting a bottom, but as we actually hit the bottom, we fall through a trapdoor into the bright new world, the realm of spiritual truth. Only by moving fully into the darkness can we move through into the light. And what I wrote to add to that was the light of the world in which you view it. Instead of seeing physicality as how others have painted or defined it to you, you begin to view the world illuminated by your own light. And this can be scary. It can be a really scary thing. Like I said, it makes you rethink a lot about past choices and decisions. And you can have this sort of remorse or shame for things that you've done or the way that you've lived your life, now that you want to or see that you could live it differently. So it just, I wrote the I wrote the Tyler Childress quote. I really like his one song, Lovely Lady May. And one of the lines from that song says, I've seen my share of troubles and I've held my weight in shame. I think that is one of the ways that you can interpret what Shakti writes in their quotes. So I think I'll read it one more time for you, the whole thing, and then tell you my interpretation of it after trying not to get lost in the sauce and reconnect with spirituality in the physical sense, because everything emanates the divine in physicality, which is spirituality. So Shakti says, the piercing of the veil of illusion, the point where we truly recognize that our physical world is not the ultimate reality, and we begin to turn inward to discover the true nature of existence. At these times, we feel we are hitting a bottom, but as we actually hit the bottom, we fall through a trapdoor into a bright new world, the realm of spiritual truth. Only by moving fully into the darkness can we move through the light. And then I wrote, the light of the world in which you view it. You view the world illuminated by your own light. So, yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about in terms of light. Now, let's move on to the concept of love, which is also something we talked about last week. And I just wanted to go back, hopefully briefly-ish, and just expand upon what I talked about in my life update last week. So last week I talked about the idea of love, how the quote was popping up in my Facebook feed of that quote, love is not enough, or sometimes love is not enough, and that it's been bothering me. That's what I talked about in last week's life update. And I've had a lot of people comment on YouTube and Discord, if you're a Patreon, about what I talked about. And I love it. I'm so excited for people to talk about it. And I've talked about it only further because of talking about it on the podcast with my husband and a couple other friends. And it's really something that makes you think about stuff. Like, my quote last week was, is it that there's not enough love, or is it simply that sometimes love is not enough? So I just wanted to talk about that since, today's podcast topic is love and light. So the thing I wanted to start out by saying was, I feel like there's going to be two people, which I talked about in last week's podcast. You're either going to be the person that says love is always enough, there simply sometimes is just not enough love, or you're going to be the person that says sometimes love is not enough. And I just want to say, since people probably already know this, I am of the opinion, I am on the side of the fence that has the pickets that read, love is always enough. Sometimes it's just that there is not enough love. So it's just, I don't know. I'm just going to say love is always enough. And I want to say that walking away from others is a form of love. Now, given that, because I'm not here to, I don't want to have people, like, when I say love is always enough, I don't want people to think that I'm saying if you're in a bad relationship, you have to stay in it. No. I mean, that is not what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say that I think love is always enough. It's just that it depends on how love is reciprocated and presented from one another. Reciprocation was something that we talked about, my husband and I, and a couple of my friends. They were like, well, love can always be enough, but it depends on how it's being reciprocated and how someone sees it, and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, perfect, cool, got it. But I also think that there is love in walking away from a relationship. One of our patrons, Anya, was talking about how when it comes to her children, love is always going to be enough. But sometimes when it came to her parents, love is not always enough. Just like how I talked about last week with my parents. They divorced, and my mom told me that she's of the opinion, and she's older than me. She's in her mid-50s. So, talking about 27-year-old Olivia versus 22 and 13-year-old Olivia. And then my mom probably talking to me, and she's like, yeah, you're silly. You think that love is enough. Yeah, I think that sometimes love isn't enough. Like that is the age difference and perception difference as well. But again, I'm not here to tell you, like, if you're in a bad relationship, sometimes walking away is love. It's just, I think when you walk away from a relationship in the name of love or with love, you do so in a way that lets the other person know that they are not the villain and they are not the victim. You walked away because giving that person the space in order to understand themselves or learn or have the chance or the environment to learn more about themselves in order to love themselves and others is the decision you've made in and with love. That's what I wanted to talk about too, or at least add in as a little aside. And this just, we talk about the ebb and flow of things. And I think sometimes walking away in love is going to be an ebb or a flow, because your relationship with this person that is full of love will ebb and flow. And sometimes you just have to walk away, and maybe that person will come back into your life and they'll be different. They'll be like, yeah, great. Well, not different, but they will have realized things about themselves that the space you gave them in the name of love allowed them to, you know? I think you can walk away with love. And again, that just leads to my idea of that love is always enough. But one of the things that's also been bothering me, and maybe this is a little too heavy, but I was reading in one of John O'Donohue's books too, that he states that one of our purposes, and he might not have, and I'm not quoting him. I couldn't find the quote. I did look for it for you guys though. But one of the things that he talks about is that one of our purposes on this planet of being a body existing within a soul is to learn love and to also be loved. So one of our many purposes on this earth is to not only love, but to be loved. And it's been crossing my mind, the thought that perhaps some of us are not meant to experience love in the ways others are. At least in a quantifiable way, I suppose, if you can quantify love. And it just, like, if you could measure love, I've had relationships that have broken my heart, both friends and romantic, where it feels like I want to shout to the world that love is not enough, you know? But when I look back on those relationships and the heartbreak that they've caused, it's like looking through like a stained glass window. Like you've put those pieces back together and it makes a picture, it makes a story, because hindsight is always 20/20, right? And it feels like love has still always been enough, but with those people that have walked out of my life or that I've walked away from with love, you might feel like, well, are they getting the love that they need? And is that like a hero complex type of thing? I don't know. I've also thought about it in this way too, in a more spiritual way. Let's move towards that a little bit. Of we all have soul contracts, right? Soul contracts, in my idea or my understanding, is the outline of the lessons you're supposed to learn in this life. So you decide to incarnate, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. You decide as a soul, God, creator, source, the angels, whoever it is, comes up to you and they're like, hey, I got this big old book, a scroll, a packet of pages, whatever you want it to be, a floppy disk. And they're like, this is going to be your life. These are the things that the higher sources have dictated you need to learn in order to reach enlightenment, right? Do you accept the quest? And you're like, heck yeah, I accept the quest. And then you Avengers assemble your spirit guides, right? Your spirit guides are going to be the people you've had past lives with, the spiritual beings you've known, and the souls that are going to help guide you in this life, colloquially, right? And you embark on this journey, but you don't know who's going to be, or you forget now that you've incarnated, who's going to be a part of your soul contract. And it's like, well, what part of the soul contract are they going to be? What relationship are they going to have to you in your life? And do you feel like there's someone that is supposed to be loved more? And then you have to walk away from them, but you feel like you have not been able to give them the love that they deserve. But who are you to think about that? You know, like, who are you to think that you need to love someone more than they can love themselves or find love in others? That's the thing that I've been tripping up on when I think back on relationships with friends and romantic partners that I've had, where I'm like, well, are they finding what they need? Did I give them enough love? Are they going to receive enough love, etc.? Do they have enough love within themselves and for themselves? So I don't know. That's something that I've been thinking about. And I don't know if I was able to articulate my last part about love well enough. But I think that you can walk away from someone in love. You can say, I will give you the space to figure this out however you need. But just know that I love you. We don't have to see eye to eye. We don't have to agree on things. We don't have to whatever. But I'm going to walk away. You know, it's just things. If you love something, let them go. But don't let them go and be like, I'm the victim in this scenario, I have to walk away, or don't walk away from them and villainize them and victimize yourself. Just know that at one point in time you loved that person and they loved you in any way, shape, or form that you could or could not conceptualize, and that walking away is okay. So anyways, that's my soapbox. My carpetbagger sort of presentation on just moving towards the fact of, do you think that love is enough? And sometimes there isn't enough love, or that love is enough. So anyways, what else did I want to talk about? I did want to read for you guys the little excerpt from my last Patreon life update, because it kind of goes into the idea that we just talked about at the beginning of this podcast of how the body exists in the soul, and more so how spirituality and energy can be around us and within the physical world too. It's not something that we are separate from, because if you're on your spiritual journey, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to give you my own perceptions and ideas and education, or ideas that I research sometimes. Today I've not researched anything. This is all just my own opinions from things that I've read and listened to and experienced. But to create and foster and found your own spiritual journey. But I think that what I ended up writing kind of impromptu on Patreon for my life update is a little applicable to the ideas and concepts we've talked about today. And I think it's a good thing to end on. So what I wrote is the following. I feel that reading and writing is one of our most potent forms of magic, one of which people have created to cast spells all over the world. Think about it. Right now, you're seeing little tiny shapes, and one person, followed and adopted by many others from long ago, created to communicate thoughts, feelings, images, and emotions of their own to you. A magical gift which you can choose to receive or decline, and feel and interpret in your own ways. When we think about magic, I have the impression that so many others believe magic is something which needs to be created with purposeful intent, instruction, or logic, barred by rules and guidelines which must be upheld, yielded to, and understood, which I do not wish to negate from, as in life there are certain intrinsic rules which govern our world and others which people have created to maintain order and fairness in physicality. But I have an inclination to believe that when I think about the term magic, a new sublime form of thought evokes within my mind. Magic is not to be captured in physicality, as magic is an emanation, the suffusion of energy which creates all forms of life and spirit as we can and cannot comprehend it. From the spectator point of view in which I hold in regards to the idea of magic, I feel that people are trying to create magic from physical forms, to coax magic from the depths of physicality in order to harness its alchemical properties. But isn't magic what creates the physical in the first place? Magic is all around us. Magic is the ever-present undercurrent of existence and the beyond. The sublimation of magic is what has given rise to life as we know it. The words you are reading, the chair you're sitting in, the air you're breathing, and even you yourself are the embodiment of magic. To wake up each morning to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, hear the bird songs resonating in your ears. Magic. Existence is magic, and to move throughout life and enjoy its existence is to cast spells and to make magic. In any form you perceive of the magic around you, I hope you find its glimmer today, and especially in the days when believing in something like the idea of magic seems absurd, for magic is within and around you, always. Anyways, that is what I wanted to talk about with you all today. I hope you enjoyed this Sunday's podcast. And until next time, if you're interested in a reading, please feel free to go down to the description below. I have availability for October and possibly beginning into the beginning of November. But I appreciate you all listening. I hope you enjoyed this Sunday's podcast. And until next time, peace.